Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Solari Report. My name is John Titus. I am the co-host and co-producer of Money and Markets with Catherine Austin-Fitz. I also have my own video channels on several platforms, YouTube, Odyssey, and BitChute. That channel is called Best Evidence on all three platforms. This special report of the Solari Report, this production, in fact, is going to appear on Best Evidence, my channels, 1 month after posting on Solari.com, which will happen on December 18th for Solari and roughly January 18th of next year on my channel. Today, I am joined by Iain Davis, who has just published a terrific new book called The Technocratic Dark State, Trump, AI, and Digital Dictatorship. I can tell you, as I told Iain when we talked about this book, it's one of two books that I've read cover to cover in the last 20 years. It is absolutely masterful summary of what the tech bros have been up to. I've been kind of watching them like, what are they up to? Iain's book nails it and describes in excruciating detail what they've been doing over the last 20 years and really beyond. There's several examples from the late 90s where everything sort of fits into place when you read this book. And the book is very thoroughly researched and very well written. Iain understands how to write, and it paints a very dark picture of the digital plantation that we're all headed for unless we get together and slam on the brakes to avoid the nightmare described in his title, the title of the book, The Digital Dictatorship. Iain is here today, I am pleased to report, to talk about this book. When you see Iain, you will notice that he has two I's, and so does the spelling of his name, Iain. It's I-A-I-N. Iain Davis, a name you will want to familiarize yourself with. You can find Iain's work at iaindavis.com. Iain's published work has also appeared at off-guardian.org and unlimitedhangout.com, as well as ukcolumn.org. Iain is also a member of the Independent Media Alliance, along with Catherine Austin-Fitz and James Corbett and Richard Grove, among others. Iain, welcome to the Solari Report.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's good to talk to you in person and do an interview. This is my first ever interview that I've done for my website or for my YouTube channel and for my video channels. It's also the first interview I've done for Solari.com. So you're my first interviewee. You have to take it easy on me. But it's a pleasure to talk to you because your book really helped me understand the world. Because I tended to ignore these guys. These tech bros annoy me. I will get into that. And this book really describes, I should not be annoyed. I should be paying a lot more attention. Your book has helped me. But let me I want to go right to my favorite part of the book, which addresses money creation. This is the part where it's like, oh, okay, I get it now. But let me say this. The people with the power to create money out of thin air, they're in control now. They've been in control for several centuries. They're private parties. And so my initial question is, why do the old money people, let's call them, even tolerate the tech bros who are offering crypto schemes, especially stable coins, to compete with the money issuance of banks and central banks, frankly? In other words, why don't the monetary powers that be just use in the U.S. the Department of Justice to snuff out these would-be tech bro competitors the same way they killed prosecutions and investigations into Wall Street in the wake of the global financial crisis? In other words, what are the tech bros offering to the old money powers that those powers don't have already?
Yeah, I mean, they're offering essentially a workaround for the U.S. Constitution. The plan is clearly that they want a tokenized digital international monetary and financial system. And in most places around the world, we have fully independent central banks. So if we look at, for example, the European Central Bank, it's in their founding documents that they literally state no government has any control over us whatsoever. In fact, I think it's part of their documentation where they say we will not take any advice from any government. So they are firmly independent. Other central banks around the world, certainly, if we look at the Bank of England, that's independent by virtue of its royal charter. So where that situation exists, and if we then look at, who controls central bank, those kind of independent central banks, it's the private sector. It's generally the major shareholders of the leading commercial banks. But nonetheless, while that situation exists, they can create an independent, privately controlled, tokenized, digital international monetary and financial system. The situation is not quite the same in the US, as your excellent research pointed out, because constitutionally speaking, the issuance of currency is theoretically controlled by the people through Congress. So you can't have this total control of this tokenized digital monetary system using a central bank digital currency with the US. And obviously the US is probably the most important economy in the world. It's got the world reserve currency, or the dominant reserve currency. And so that's a problem. That is a problem if you want a privatized, tokenized, digital international monetary and financial system. What these tech bros that I refer to in the book as neo nerds, what they have offered is a workaround through stable coins, and the Trump administration has most certainly obliged with the Genius Act, because the Genius Act, by determining that these stable coins are not a national currency and they're not an asset class, therefore they're not subject to oversights by the Securities and Exchange Commission, has set these firmly outside the reach of, in this case, Congress and the Constitution. But they're called payment stable coins. They are backed, they're effectively backed 1-to-1 by the dollar through treasuries and other dollar instruments. They are, in every single practical sense, a digital US dollar. They can be exchanged 1-for-1 for the dollar internationally.
Stablecoins, if I understand what you're saying correctly, they spend just like money in our bank account. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll be spent just like that. I mean, they'll be used just as you would use the dollar now. You can purchase goods with it, and even to the extent that they've got bridging systems now, which is something that the Bank of International Settlements has been very keen to put into place. Bridging payment systems that enables you to use a digital dollar as you would use the dollar if you had a bank payment card and paid for a product or service in the high street or on Main Street. So it's not just about online transactions. You'll also be able to spend them via intermediary payment service providers,
right,
in a shop or in a store.
So that's such a great point. That ultimately what the tech bros are offering to the powers that be is an end run around the Constitution. So right now, under the currently configured U.S. monetary system, we, the people, in theory and legally, we have some measure of control over the money issuing entities, both over the Fed at the wholesale level and over the banks, the commercial banks, through the FDIC and through the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. What you were talking about with stable coins and with crypto is the money issuance from private entities. And I know this because, in fact, I've been trying to learn about stable coins and crypto. And so I'm like, well, okay, I'll just go to legal treatises and start reading case law on stable coins and exchanges and all the rest. And there is no case law. It is completely private. It is completely dark. And transparency is an issue that we're going to touch on later in this interview. But that's great. But there is one other feature of the monetary control and stable coins and digital money and tokenized money that is offering an advantage to the old line money powers. And that is, from where I'm sitting, it doesn't digital money, fully digital money, offer to the powers that be a way of controlling debt that might otherwise spiral out of control irreversibly and fatally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would suggest that that's very much why they are so desperate to get this new international monetary and financial system up and running. Because if we look at, let's say that the estimated officially acknowledged global debt is 320 trillion. and of which about 40 trillion, I don't know what it was this morning, but 39 trillion or whatever it was is US debt.
U.S. public debt. That's public debt, not
Yeah,
private debt.
yeah, not private debt. Yeah, just public debt. So then if you look at the if you then add into that the nominal value of the potential debt in the derivatives market, then you're looking at, some people say 1 quadrillion, some people say, who, it's debatable what that is, because as was noted when they looked at what happened during the 2008 financial crisis, much of that trading is over the counter. And I think the investigating committee that looked into it, which might have been the FIDC, I can't remember, that looked into it, actually said that it's unknown trading. We don't know. It's not talking about transparency. There isn't any.
Right. They don't know. It's so in other words, you don't ever really know at any given time what the money supply is, how big the money supply is.
Yeah.
Now somebody knows, but it's not anybody in the public who knows. And so when I read this in your book, I was like, this explains a lot, because I'd seen law review article by someone nominated to be the head of the Office of the Control of the Currency here in the U.S. And the law review article said, listen, because money is issued as debt and debt can get out of control, one thing you can do with the central bank digital currency, which is an alternate form of what we're talking about with stablecoins, what you can do is you can simply delete money out of people's accounts.
Yeah.
And so it's a system of total control that you're describing in your book.
Yeah, no, it's total control. You can delete money. You can set the duration on money. You can control where and when it is spent, simply through programming it, through literally programming it. And I mean, one of the great ironies, I think, from a US, the population's perspective in terms of electing Trump, is that, he made a great deal of opposing central bank digital currency, because quite rightly, a sizable number of the population were very concerned about that, and rightly so.
Absolutely.
But what he's offered instead, what he's gone ahead and done instead through an executive order, which is one of the first things that he announced when he first came into office, is to create the, for want of a better expression, the enabling environment, the legal enabling environment for stable coins, which are arguably worse. They're worse. I mean, I was one of the questions that,
why are they worse? Why are they? Because it relates right back to what you were saying earlier.
Because there's no oversight, there's no control. They're privately issued. There's no control of them. Whereas, and I think, because I asked myself the question, and it was really in researching this book that I think I've answered that question for myself and hopefully for others, is that I couldn't understand why the US wasn't on board with central bank digital currency. I was thinking, what's going on? Why are they? Your work actually started making me think, well, there's a problem here with the Constitution, and then I looked at that as well. And then I realized that's why, the US has never been really on board with central bank digital currency, because of this problem.
Right. They've been dragging their feet compared to everybody else across the globe.
Yeah.
That sort of wraps up why tolerate the tech bros? What are they up to? What do they offer the old line powers to be? I want to move on to a concept you discuss, and that I thought was kind of bogus for a long time. I thought it was a buzzword. Your book discusses interoperability at length. Before I read your book, I thought that was simply, interoperability. That's another buzzword, but it really isn't. So why don't you tell us what interoperability is and what crucial functions does it perform?
Well, this goes to the heart of deceit, which is a big theme in the book. Basically, interoperability links what they call disparate data sets. Now, those data sets could be appertaining to anything. So it could be a data set of digital identity, or a data set of a digital ID product, which is a separate card, such as the Real ID system, although that is linked in the US to ident, which is the kind of bigger overarching system. Or it could be financial. It could be a financial tokenized product. So For example, if you think about your driving license is issued, that is controlled by the issuer of the driving license. It is not linked to your bank card. Your bank card is issued by a private commercial bank or a payment provider. The two things are not linked. They're not linked. What interoperability and if you look at what the Bank for International Settlements has been doing over the last 10 or more years, it has been obsessed with this notion of interoperability, creating an interoperable system. And what that means is the data set from your driving license, so everybody's, can be linked usually via software such as Palantir, Gotham, or something like that, to the data set from your bank card. So these two things can now be linked into one unified. What they're looking to do that is a unified ledger of some sort, whether that's going to be blockchain or some other form of ledger.
While interoperability is in its infancy, so is just security awareness. And I think, unfortunately, interoperability is accelerating a little faster than security awareness. And so it's being done in a dangerous way in a lot of times.
That's an interesting point, because EMRs, electronic medical record systems, have security controls. But what it boils down to is the person setting this thing up doing it correctly. Have they turned on the right settings and turned off the wrong settings? And the answer, according to these 2,000 you said are exposed, is obviously no.
Now, what they have been trying to do on a global scale for this digital international monetary and financial system is create interoperability between all currencies, interoperability between all digital currencies. So the first thing they need to do is convert the existing fiat currencies into digital forms. So that's where, outside of the US, that was the favorite way of doing that is the favored way of doing that is central bank digital currency. In the US, for the reasons we've just discussed, that was slightly problematic. So therefore it's stable coins. In other parts of the world, it's deposit tokens, but it all amounts to the same thing. It's the digitization of the existing monetary systems, whilst maintaining, the difference between currencies. So you've still got a dollar version, a sterling version, a euro version, a yen version. You've still got these different distinctions. But through interoperability, and which converts the transactions made into a single unified standard for example, for digital information exchange. So one of the things that the BIS has worked on quite a lot, I think it's Project Juno, is to introduce ISO 20022 standards for all financial information exchanges. Now, in the digital world, it's relatively easy to make transactions in one currency interoperable with the transaction in another currency. So if we're talking about business to business transactions globally, if you're buying goods and services, or if you're buying, say, commodities or manufactured products from China with the dollar, you don't have the problem. What interoperability does is remove the settlement, the clearing and the settlement and the delays and the costs that are associated with that, and makes the transaction instantaneous across borders. So what that means is if you're purchasing products from China into the US, you can pay in dollars in the US, and that will be instantaneously via interoperability received in renminbi or whatever in China, without any kind of without any kind of intermediary. But of course, there is an intermediary, and that is the permission block universal ledger, which will be controlled globally, centrally.
Yeah. Isn't it true that one of the features of stablecoins, in that being interoperable with the current monetary systems, the stablecoins spend like dollars, and so they're interoperable with the monetary system we have now, which is two-tiered. It's central banks on top and it's retail banks on the bottom. doesn't the interoperability of stablecoins with the current system offer to the U.S. powers that be a way to soak up more U.S. debt, which we obviously know is exploding?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if you think about the hesitancy that countries have shown in recent years to take on US debt, for example, Japan, that makes the US debt situation, which is precarious enough as it is, even more precarious. So by issuing your own stable coins, if you like, although these will be privately issued, as we've said, they can absorb debt. They're backed by treasury, so they can automatically absorb debt. Now, the projected value of market cap for stable coins, I think by 2035, and I may have got that wrong. Or it might even be sooner. It might even be about 2030.
I think it's 2030. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 4 trillion. So that's 4 trillion of debt that can be siphoned off essentially into a new market, into the stable coins.
And that's a market, to be clear, that exists as far away as Senegal. It's around the world.
Yeah.
People will be using US stablecoins.
Yeah. But if you think that the rate at which the debt is increasing, and I think the Trump administration was the first administration to have a $1 trillion deficit within the first quarter. So that the debt's going up quite fast, while stablecoins, in my view, offer a short-term debt release valve, and they definitely do. I think if you look at what they've got planned for a globalized, tokenized digital economy, that is ultimately where the debt will be absorbed. Well, it'll just be consumed. So currently, if the tokenized economy that is envisaged certainly by the Bank for International Settlements and its international central bank partners, if that achieves the potential 4 to 5 quadrillion global economy that they are suggesting by tokenizing everything, including us, all of us, then obviously, an official debt of around, let's for argument's sake, let's call it 500 trillion. It's gone. You've solved that problem between, if you look at it from a balance sheet perspective, currently your liabilities far outweigh your assets, but you just can create new assets out of the thin air by tokenizing everything. And then you flip that on its head, and suddenly you haven't got a debt problem.
Right, and you have no problem. There's no impediment to doing any of this if there's no transparency. True.
Yeah, none. Right.
So there's no pushback. There's no feedback loop that we're talking about here. It's open loop control by a bunch of technocrats, by a bunch of billionaires of the entire population. With the issue of consent goes out the window under what you're talking about, which is digital dictatorship. True?
Yeah.
I want to talk to, on that note, about the first part of the book, indeed the first chapter. You talk about technocrats and you talk about the Dark Enlightenment. I think I'm pretty sure people who are watching Solari and watching my channel Best Evidence, they have a decent feel for technocracy, and I'll touch on that in a minute. But more importantly now is, why don't you tell us what you mean by Dark Enlightenment? Because that was a term that was new to me and required some explanation. So what is Dark Enlightenment? What is that all about?
Well, it was a treatise that was written by a UK so-called philosopher, a guy called Nick Land, that worked in the cybernetics culture research unit at Warwick University. And they were just toying with the notion of the singularity, which is that, the point at which technology becomes self-perpetuating and outstrips our ability to adapt to it, and how humanity might cope with that. So they were very interested in Joseph Schumpeter's economic idea of creative destruction, which Schumpeter applied this purely to markets. But what Schumpeter meant was, that a market gets destroyed by technology. For example, a very easy one. If you think that the market for the steam railway gets destroyed by the diesel engine, that's a very simple analogy, but you get the idea. So they thought that creative destruction could apply to all markets for sure, but it could also be, but rather than what Schumpeter described was an effect of capitalism, i.e. capital investment in technological development created this situation. What they thought was that you could apply that to deliberately destroy markets, and seeing as markets have socio-political connotations, the people that control markets, monopolists, they have socio-political power. You could therefore apply this to the wider socio-political sense. So you could literally, capitalism could be freed up and utilized as a tool to control not just economic activity, but all kind of socio-political structures as well. Now, that was an idea that they were toying with, but what they then came up with, the Dark Enlightenment, is that as a product of that idea, that underlying idea, is horrific. So they thought that the singularity presented such a threat to humanity that and I have to say that is an assumption. That is an assumption that they made. Therefore, our only solution is to adapt to it, and we can only do that through transhumanism. We have to become genetically engineered cyborgs in order to cope with the assumed approaching singularity. That government only serves to stifle innovation, and the most important part of creative destruction is that innovation is unfettered and free and allowed to flourish. Therefore, government should be done away with completely, and innovation should be handed to private corporations. Private corporations were best placed to undertake this revolution, this global revolution, and therefore private companies and private corporations should rule unchallenged and unmolested by any kind of democratic oversight.
At its core, the Dark Enlightenment is a political and philosophical movement that challenges some of the foundational ideas of modern society. The term itself was popularized by British philosopher Nick Land in the early 2010s, but the roots go deeper. The core ideas were first developed by American tech theorist Curtis Yarvin, writing under the pseudonym Mencius Moldbug, starting around 2007. Through his influential blog, Unqualified Reservations, Yarvin laid out a radical critique of democracy, liberalism, and the modern state, proposing instead a return to centralized, hierarchical governance modeled on corporate systems. Yarvin's central argument is that modern civilization, especially in the West, has been steered into stagnation and decline by a rigid, overly idealistic belief in egalitarianism and mass participation. According to this view, democracy is not the pinnacle of political evolution. It is a system that masks inefficiency, encourages manipulation, and creates the illusion of choice without any real control. Yarvin introduced the idea of neo-cameralism, a political model in which a nation-state functions like a joint stock corporation, run by a CEO accountable only for performance, not popularity. In this model, the government is not elected but managed, like a business. To many, it sounds dystopian. To others, it sounds like a brutally honest assessment of how things already work behind the curtain. This worldview also gave rise to one of Yarvin's most infamous concepts, the cathedral. In his framework, the cathedral refers to the intertwined network of elite institutions including media, academia, and bureaucracy that shape cultural and political narratives. This system, according to Yarvin, controls society not through laws or force, but through ideology, consensus, and cultural pressure. It is not Orwell's boot stomping on a face. It is soft power that feels like truth. Nick Land, known for his cyberpunk-infused accelerationist philosophy, took Yarvin's ideas and pushed them further. Land gave the movement its name, the Dark Enlightenment. His writings injected a darker, more philosophical edge, tying these ideas to themes of post-humanism, automation, and the collapse of liberal ideals in the face of accelerating technology. Some in this school of thought advocate for exit strategies, such as private digital societies, independent city-states, or breakaway corporate enclaves, where governance is optional optimized, not voted on. Others envision a world where technology replaces outdated institutions altogether. It is a blueprint for governance in a time of increasing distrust and systemic breakdown. But what makes the Dark Enlightenment truly unsettling is not just its ideas. It is the mirror it holds up to our current reality. It forces uncomfortable questions. Are we truly free, or are we just choosing between scripted outcomes? Are democratic leaders really accountable, or are they figureheads managed by deeper forces? And if the system is failing, what comes next? These are not conspiracy theories. They are the kinds of questions rising quietly in a culture that feels increasingly unstable. It is important to be clear. The Dark Enlightenment is not a mainstream ideology, and many of its conclusions are controversial and provocative. Critics argue it promotes authoritarianism, social stratification, and a rejection of basic civil liberties. And yet, its critiques of political stagnation, media control, and the illusion of democratic power resonate with growing numbers of people who feel the system no longer serves them. The theory is a window into a radical reimagining of power, one that suggests our current systems might not be sacred, just outdated. You do not have to agree with it, but understanding it might help you recognize where some of the world's deeper currents are pulling. Stay curious, because the future might not look like the past, and some people are already coding what comes next.
Right. And that's where all this is headed. And I want to read a section from chapter 1 of your book from page 12, because it was so on point and it was like the penny dropped there, because this process that you're talking about, which is hiving off public functionality and basically constitutional sovereign functions, carving them off and distributing them to private parties who are opaque, that's going on right now. And I want to read just a couple of sentences from the book. They're sort of like, oh, okay, I see what's going on. Given that Elon Musk was neither elected by Americans nor authorized by their representatives in Congress, the Doge project represents a formal shift in political power from the public to the private sector. It is fundamentally a private sector-dominated think tank, openly empowered to restructure federal agencies. And it goes on, a technique would afford its leading figures pecking order of privileges. So this process is already underway. True?
Yeah, no, and I have to say, it's not just in the US, it's everywhere.
Yeah. And then it continues. I want to go on page 13. This gets into technocracy and sort of the more, I guess, non-obvious features of technocracy. Technocrats, unelected technocrats, rather than politicians, set policy. And technocracy is based on the belief that there are technological solutions to all social, economic, and political problems. Yeah, that's what we're seeing going on right now, for sure.
Yeah, and there is a massive overlap between the Dark Enlightenment and technocracy. If you look at the Dark Enlightenment, the way that they suggest that sovereign corporations would be in charge of a realm, and that there would be a patchwork of realms controlled by sovereign corporations. So they're talking about breaking up the nation state into a patchwork of realms,
right,
and creating a kind of network of realms, a patchwork of realms, they call it. Well, and that would be totally controlled by sovereign corporations. And the Land spoke about this thing called GovCorp, which would be it's not entirely clear. I have to say, one of the reasons that I wrote the book is because most of the things that they say is not entirely clear. So you really have to sort of kind of dig into the weeds of it to figure out. They use a lot of jargon, and they use a lot of they even use words that people don't even know, like neo-cameralization and re-territorialization and all this sort of jargon that they use. But essentially what it boils down to is smashing the nation state apart, carving it up, selling it off piecemeal to private corporations, then reconstituting that into a network.
Yep.
And then ruling that having a centralized authoritarian control over that. That is what they intend to do. And if you look at what a technate is, it's pretty similar.
Okay, so from an American point of view, what you're talking about, the net effect of these changes you just discussed, is they want to destroy the consent of the governed. Is that fair?
Well, yeah, I mean, they think, Land said that our sovereignty should be treated with derision.
Wow.
So we are nothing. We are nothing.
Right.
To the in their mindset.
But if that's right, they want to destroy the consent of the governed. In other words, you have no sovereignty. Your sovereignty is a joke. You're an asset on our balance sheet.
Yeah.
Really what you're talking about from an American point of view is just the open repeal of the Declaration of Independence. That's what the whole Revolutionary War was fought over. Was you exerting control over us, you're punitive, you punish us, you steal our assets and all the rest, and we have no say of it. We try to have a say, and we don't have any say, and that was what caused the revolution. So this is a very, I mean, it's kind of ironic, and I'll get to this in a bit, that an Englishman is writing about the destruction of the Declaration of Independence. I mean,
yeah.
Why didn't this book come out of the U.S.? I don't know. I mean, I'm not blaming you or anything. Anyway, I want to turn to another subject though, and that's a gut feel I get when I watch a lot of these tech bros. When I see a guy like Peter Thiel, he can't get through a sentence without getting tackled to the ground. It's even simple sentences. He can't do it. I see Bill Gates flailing about, talking about topics that he knows absolutely nothing about, like he's the supreme authority. I was glad to see, in light of that sort of gut reaction, like you guys are pulling a con on me. My gut feel is I'm being conned here. I'm watching an act, and so I was glad to see in your book very heavy stress that you put on the topic of deceptions, and deception and deceptive practices. Talk about the role of deception, and what the role it plays, and maybe a couple of examples of deception that we see in real time from the dark technocrats, such as Christianity and they're pushing Christianity here, or libertarianism there. Tell us about the role deception plays in those ultimately con jobs.
Yeah, so I mean, if you think about what you've just noted there about the Dark Enlightenment, the idea that it essentially just destroys the Declaration of Independence and everything it means to be a sovereign individual human being. I mean, it's the end of it. That's what they're talking about. And yet, the people that say they support this, I have a slight segue here. I did question in the book whether they really believe in things like the Dark Enlightenment. They openly support it. I mean, people like Mark Andreessen said, I am an accelerationist. Or no, I'll rephrase that. He said, we are accelerationists, which means that they believe in the Dark Enlightenment. But whether they actually believe it, or whether it's just expedient to say that they have some sort of quasi-intellectual underpinning for what they're doing, I don't know. I question that. But nonetheless, they're openly supporting such a thing as the Dark Enlightenment, which is just about the most authoritarian, fascistic kind of model of governance that you could possibly imagine.
Right. Why don't we just come right out and call it what it is? It's a plantation. That's what they're pushing, is a plantation, and they're calling it libertarianism.
They are calling it libertarianism. And I have to say, getting away with it as well.
And getting away with it. So deception is part and parcel of this push towards digital dictatorship.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I also explore quite a bit in the book is this notion of the decentralization to re-centralization trick, which people like Balaji Srinivasan, who wrote The Network State, they tie themselves in. And one of the reasons that I think people like Thiel and stumble over very simple questions is because if they were honest about what they're doing, they just couldn't say what they couldn't say it without being arrested.
So what do you think about the use of artificial intelligence, or lavender, by the IDF in identifying Hamas targets? And secondly, do you agree with Elon Musk about that the population decline is a risk for humanity?
Look, I'm not, without going into all the I'm not on top of all the details of what's going on in Israel, because my bias is to defer to Israel. It's not for us to second guess everything. And I believe that broadly the IDF gets to decide what it wants to do, and that they're broadly in the right. And that's sort of the perspective I come back to. And if I fall into the trap of arguing you on every detailed point, I'm actually I would actually be conceding the broader issue that the Middle East should be micromanaged from Cambridge, and I think that's just simply absurd. And so I'm not going to concede that point. And what was the other?
So they can't be honest. So they have to lie, and they are tying themselves up in knots. So at one point, I mean, the network state concept is quite important because that is very much the way that it is being rolled out globally. But one of the things that Balaji Srinivasan says in the book is that the new system will be different because the new system that he wants will be different because it will be decentralized. Now, that is a libertarian principle. Of course, the notion of decentralized government, and it's not just a libertarian principle, it's a small c conservative principle as well. The idea of localized governance makes sense to a lot of people. But what he then says is that once everything has been decentralized, it will then be re-centralized. So hang on a minute. So you're talking about devolving governance in some way so that you can then exert centralized authoritarian control over all of it. Well, that's the opposite of decentralization.
Right.
That's not decentralization.
Yeah, another deception.
Yeah.
Just a massive deception you talk about, 180-degree deception that appears again and again in the book, is this notion that these technocrats come out and they're like, oh, we're anti-globalists, we don't want a new world order and all these globalists controlling everything. But in fact, they themselves are puppets of the globalists. Yeah,
I mean, it's ridiculous, really. But, Peter Thiel is one of the people that has railed against, he calls global governance the Armageddon or the Antichrist.
Right.
And yet he's on the steering committee of the Bilderberg Group with Alex Karp, who they both run Palantir, which has basically taken the Total Information Awareness project started by John Poindexter.
Started by Poindexter when? How far back does this go?
Well, that was about 2000 when 2001, I'm going to say.
Right.
But certainly by 2003, In-Q-Tel, CIA's investment arm, had they magic Palantir into existence. I think that's not unfair to say. They certainly invested heavily in Palantir, which then ran the Total Information Awareness project really on behalf of the CIA for 6 years. So I think it was 6 years or so that or maybe more. That the CIA was Palantir's only client. So that's where Palantir comes from.
We're going to take a closer look tonight at privacy and security. We all know there's a debate in the country. Does giving the government greater freedom to keep an eye on people, others would say spy on people, in the name of security, undermine the basic American commitment to individual freedom? The Pentagon is currently testing something called the Total Information Awareness Program. The American Civil Liberties Union calls it the most extensive surveillance program in history. And what adds to the controversy is the man who's being named to run it. Here's ABC's Jackie Judd.
This is what the government would monitor: where Americans travel, what they buy, how much money they withdraw. Electronic records from all of those activities and more dumped directly into the Pentagon.
Driver's license, information about where people live, phone numbers. Conceivably, you could add in information that's obtained by law enforcement.
The Pentagon believes that by putting all this into supercomputers, suspicious patterns masked as everyday activities would emerge.
You're looking for trends and transactions that are associated with some potential terrorist act. That's what you're looking for, and you're trying to put those pieces together.
Supporters of the Total Information Awareness Project say private industries such as credit rating companies already collects a lot of this material, so why not let the government take a look?
We owe more to the victims of September 11 than just to say, oh yeah, well, we did a bad job last time, but it's too dangerous to try to do a better job next time.
Normally, though, authorities would have to get a warrant for electronic surveillance.
The big deal is that the government is proposing to arrest people on the basis of this. The government's proposing to label people as terrorists, to have an impact upon their lives, in a very direct and significant way.
Not only is the idea controversial, so is the person who came up with it and is running the pilot project.
Admiral, do you swear?
President Reagan's national security advisor, John Poindexter, was convicted, then cleared on a technicality of lying to Congress during the Iran-Contra scandal. The test run now underway could take a few years, and real information, say officials, is not being used. But the Pentagon is clearly moving to create the largest electronic eye ever to look at any and all Americans. Jackie Judd, ABC News, Washington.
So, in other words, these guys, these alleged libertarians, push this notion that these rugged individuals, these tough guys, these capitalists, they survived competition, they rose to the top because they were the biggest, the strongest, the smartest, and the best. They were backed by the government the entire time.
Yeah.
That's a huge deception, no?
Yeah, no, it's immense. I mean, and you know, there isn't anything that I could find that, you know, anything with any substance that's important that I could find that they've said or they've done that is as it appears and is honest. There just isn't any. There's none. It's total deception from start to finish.
It's total deception, and it's thorough, and it's everywhere. I want to read another quote from the book and get your comment on this. This is an episode that happened earlier this year, kind of early on in the Trump administration. The official propaganda narrative goes like this. This is talking about the fallout, an alleged fallout between Trump and Musk. The official narrative goes like this. Elon Musk was furious because Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act, the government's 2025 budget bill, reduced taxpayer subsidies for electric vehicle manufacturers, including Tesla. Goes on, Musk was said to have reacted angrily by publishing his June 5th X post in which he announced that Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. Tell us about that whole yarn.
Yeah, I mean, it's nonsensical for a start because Musk ended his tenure at the head of the Doge on schedule as planned, 180 days into office. There was nothing happened when Musk. I mean, there was some contention because there were suspicions that he'd been taking drugs on the campaign trail, and people were a bit upset about that. But Musk, not Trump. I got it. But when he was, you know, there was kind of a public parting of ways when Musk left on schedule as planned, left the Doge project. And Trump even gave him a gold key, a symbolic gold key to the White House. So they're best, you know, I mean, they're obviously, Trump and both J.D. Vance said, we will carry on working with Elon. I mean, the media couldn't really deny that because they'd done a press conference where they said exactly that. So there wasn't much they could do about that. 1 week later, we are supposed to believe that Trump and Musk hate each other so much that Musk is now trying to, I mean, some of the ridiculous things that were said, for example, that he is an existential threat to the presidency, having paid, you know, $250 million to put the president in the office in the first place. You know, that there was this threat, and therefore, you know, Musk had outed Trump's. I mean, and I think there's very much a thing about saying about Trump's involvement with the Epstein and his exposure in the Epstein files, and then we have the big debacle about whether or not they're going to release the Epstein files or not, as if those files need to be released in order for us to know that Trump was heavily involved with Epstein. We don't need
we already
the
know
files
that.
to know that.
Right. We look at the photos, Guy. You're in the photos.
With their arms around each other.
With young chicks all over the place. It's pretty obvious. Yeah.
Right.
But, I mean, the whole thing's a joke. So, but generally speaking, when you have manufactured drama like this, manufactured controversy, which is completely synthetic, what are those controversies designed to hide?
Well, it's to hide what they're doing and what they're actually doing. So, I mean, if you look at the, we've already discussed what the Doge did, but it also created the framework for the for companies like Palantir to come in and take all the data from disparate data sets like the Department of Justice, Department of Defense, to take all the data, homogenize them, make it interoperable so that they can create a centralized, unified data structure that controls many, 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 many different parts of the US government. That's and also you would have to say harvest all the data that is stored by those departments, which is the personal and private data of US citizens.
Right.
So that's what they're doing. That's what has happened, and that's what they're doing. But instead, people talk about whether or not Elon Musk has fallen out with Donald Trump.
Yeah, right.
It's totally irrelevant. It doesn't just meaningless.
They get involved with the personal drama, he said, she said, rather than with the fundamental issues. It's basically a distraction. That's, I think, what I hear you saying.
Yeah.
I want to turn to a topic, which is a subject, which is how close are we now to having the trap sprung, having the trap thrown, and living in a digital dictatorship, and not being able to escape the system of slavery that you're describing? How close to realizing that are we right now? How many moves do the powers that be need to achieve the plantation that they're after? Are there a few, I don't know, let's call them sufficient conditions for destroying sovereignty, for destroying democratic governance for good that you can identify now?
I think, unfortunately, technologically, the infrastructure has already been built. It's already there. But their massive problem they've got is that they have to somehow entice us into going along with it. Because ultimately, this is a behavioral control system. Once our digital identity is linked to programmable digital currency, then they will have total behavioral control over humanity.
Okay, let me get at it another way. What are the things? What are the biggest impediments to achieving digital dictatorship that exist right now?
Well, we are, the people. If we don't go along with it, if for example, it's slightly different outside of the US, but certainly in the US, if the people of the US demand that their constitution is upheld, then they've got a problem. They can't go ahead with their plans. For example, not accepting and not using stable coins and demanding that they are treated as a currency, a national currency, because that's what they are.
Cash is a big impediment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, what could we do? What can people do? Yeah, sure. So people can, I think the most important thing is people realize the power that they've got in their wallets.
Right.
The decisions that people make about what they buy, let's look at it this way. There's a reason why they want to control what you buy, where you can buy it, who you buy it from, and how much money you can save. Because once they've got control of that, they've got control of you. Well, the flip side of that is that if you consciously make those decisions that you're not going to support this digital dictatorship, that you're going to use cash, that you're going to be as self-sufficient as possible, that you're going to buy from people whose values you respect, that you're going to do business with people who you consider to be honest and trustworthy, then if we exercise that power, that is precisely the power that they're desperate to take away from us.
Right.
So clearly that's the power that they are most fearful of. So that's the power that we should exercise. Right.
In other words, when you see somebody like Augustin Carstens, the head of the Bank for International Settlements, get up, did you see that speech?
Yeah.
Where he was discussing the distinction between cash and central bank digital currency?
Yeah.
What did he say?
He said, at the moment, I think he was talking about a $100 note, wasn't he? But he was referencing pesos as well. But he said, at the moment, we don't know where that expression of a central bank's liability is used, or who's using it, or where they're using it. But with central bank digital currency, which is just that just means programmable digital currency of any kind. But with programmable digital currency, well, not only will we know who's spending what, where they're spending it, and why, and what they bought, we will have the power to enforce control. I'm paraphrasing.
Right. In other words, we can enforce our own rules. He says, well, we have our own rules. We can enforce them ourselves,
Yeah.
So in other words, a lot of times these guys, they give themselves away and they tell you what they're after, and they tell you what they don't like. They don't like not knowing where the money is and what you're spending it on and the inability to control it. And they want rules to be able to control what you spend your money on and what amount, when and where and how.
Isn't that when Jerome Powell on that call? Was it when Jerome Powell just almost spit his dummy out?
It was in his diplomatic way, he did. It was October 2020. It was during the pandemic. Yeah. And Powell was sitting there and he's like, well, I think there are a lot of advantages of central bank digital currency, but I think we also need to be concerned about privacy and all the rest. He had to make a token objection in his diplomatic way, which he did, but you're right. Powell absolutely was freaked out because Augustin Powell, the head of the Bank for International Settlements, had just gotten up and had shown his true colors and revealed his bloodlust for total control. So what you were talking about in this book is not some hypothetical reality. It's a reality that is rolling out right now in real time. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one of the things, this isn't included in the book, but one thing that I wish I had now, but there was a very important interview with talking about how they view these people. That they're called neo-reactionaries. So people like Thiel and Musk, and they're part of the neo-reactionary movement. Thiel was asked, it was a very simple question. Do you want humanity to continue? Was the question that he was asked. And he
so yes, no. Yes, no, I don't know. Those are the answers.
He couldn't answer it. So that gives you an idea. I mean, if somebody asked me that question, I'm sure it's yes is a fairly simple, but he couldn't answer that question.
You would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would,
this is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit.
Because they don't want us to continue to be I mean this seriously. If you look at their work and what they say and what they do, they don't want us to continue to be the species that we are. They don't want us to continue to be that species.
Right. They're not for self-determination by us at all. I want to turn back to an issue you raised, which is governance and what the system may look like. Right now, we have a system of nation states and of sovereignty, and throughout the West, mostly democracies. Your book goes into what is coming and what is coming to replace nation states. Why don't you go and explain a little bit about what you see coming? I guess you call it technates. What are we talking about with technates? What sort of realms are we looking at?
Well, I think we need to look very much at special economic zones that are proliferating around the world. I mean, at the moment, I think there are something like 5,000 special economic zones of various types. And they go from, basically just kind of, subsidized warehousing costs and, some tax breaks for foreign companies to set up business in a particular zone, all the way to charter cities, which are privately run zones. So these are special economic zones, broadly speaking, you could say are deregulated zones often with their own jurisdiction for not only regulation, but things like policing those regulations and enforcing the rules that whatever it is that they want to enforce. So, for example, a good example of that would be NEOM in Saudi Arabia, where NEOM is both a project city. The people are probably familiar with the line in this big modern thing that they're building. But NEOM is also the name of the widest special economic zone. Now, Saudi Arabia is not known for its legal tolerance, and yet NEOM is a jurisdiction unto itself. They don't have to obey Sharia law in NEOM. NEOM is outside of the Saudi Arabian state's legal system. It is its own jurisdiction.
Even though geographically it is wholly within Saudi Arabia? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so it's within Saudi Arabia, but jurisdictionally, it is outside of Saudi Arabia. So that sounds
a lot to me like the Bank for International Settlements as it exists inside of Basel, Switzerland.
Exactly.
It's jurisdictionally independent. You can't reach inside and get anything. It's secret.
So these special economic zones are proliferating around the world, as I said. Now there are particular ones. So there's a Peter Thiel and his entourage and his partners, people like Mark Andreessen, and they were invested in a company called Pronomos Capital. And also I suspect that they're behind Niway Capital as well. But these two capital investment firms, venture investment firms, they are very keen on the notion of charter cities. So these are private jurisdiction, privately owned and run and operated cities. Now they've started various projects. For example, they've got one in Nigeria called Itana. There was a quote, and I'm just looking for the quote here. I can't remember the professor's name, but he's a US based professor of African studies, who just openly said that they've created this thing called the Nigerian government has created this thing called the Lekki Free Zone. And what this professor said is that when you are inside the zone, you are outside the Nigerian state. But the Lekki Free Zone is territorially inside the Nigerian state. Then at the same time, very, very much along the same idea, and one of his executive orders as well, when Trump first came into office, was this notion of creating what he called freedom cities. Now, freedom cities essentially would be, if they proceed as envisaged, and they're again backed by Pronomos Capital, the Charter Cities Institute, the Freedom Cities Coalition, which is all backed by these same players that you and I are discussing. If they go ahead as planned, they will be deregulated free zones of innovation with their own jurisdiction within the United States.
So wait. So let me get this straight. If they're deregulated, these places, whether they're in the U.S. or whether they're in Saudi Arabia or Nigeria or wherever they are, I take it that people are free to do whatever they want in these places, if you happen to live in one.
Well, I think that currently saying, well, they'll have to abide by federal laws. So or if they're outside of the US, they'll have to abide by the laws. So you can't just kill people. But for example, in Honduras, in Prospera, which is one of these freedom cities that has been set up in Honduras, currently Peter Thiel is investing in unregulated genetic experimentation, gene editing in Prospera, because
I see. So the powers that be are free to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
But what about the man on the street? Can he do whatever? What money is he using? Can he do whatever he wants, or are there some restrictions, perhaps?
Yeah. So the idea is, and this is that's why I said that I think the book, The Network State, is quite important, because Balaji Srinivasan is very much linked into this neo-reactionary movement, and he's also obviously very closely associated with Thiel and Pronomos Capital. He's on the board of Pronomos Capital. So he wrote that all value goes digital. All value goes digital. So every asset, and it's not just asset, all currency is digital. Every asset is digital, tokenized, stored on a permissioned blockchain. So the founders of the network state or freedom city or charter city.
The founders are the equivalent of what in our current system?
CEOs. So that the CEO of the sovereign state. So these would be created as sovereign states run by a sovereign corporation whose CEO would be, well, essentially the king.
Essentially the king. Well, do the people living there, are they like shareholders who have a vote in what goes on?
No. All value goes digital, including you. So you would be you would agree initially when you joined or were subject to the sovereign state, you would sign a smart contract or agree to a smart contract where essentially you hand over all of your assets or control of all of your assets and all of your personal income and everything to the founder. The founder. Now that they'll obviously frame it in the sense that they're good custodians of your assets and but nonetheless, it's when everything is digital on a permissioned ledger, which is what they are talking about, then obviously only those with access permissions have control of whatever is on that ledger.
Right. So you're going to go from a system where you're a voter and you have some control of your destiny to you're an asset on a ledger. Fair?
Yes. Yeah. That's the idea. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And you're going to have to, you'll sign, you're going to give it away. That's what I hear you saying. People are going to be deceived into giving away their own sovereignty.
Because they think it's libertarian, you see.
Right.
What they have managed to sell this as, what they talk about it as governance as a service.
Right.
And this was something that was mentioned in the Dark Enlightenment, and this was something that's mentioned in the network state. This idea that you buy in governance. So sure, you don't have any kind of influence or control over that governance because it's something that you agree to be subjected to. So what Land said was he spoke about this idea called free exit. So free exit would mean, all right, I don't like the way you're running things, so I am free to leave and go and buy a governance service from someone else. So that's all well and good, obviously, if you have the ability to do that. But seeing as most of us are tied to where we live for all kinds of reasons, not just financial reasons, but, we have people that we love and that we care for. We can't just up sticks and move. Vast majority, billions of us, we can't just up sticks and move because the government is oppressing us. If that was true, then nobody would ever be oppressed, would they? Because they'd just leave and go somewhere utopia. But so what they're talking about is nonsense. What they are talking about is a highly hierarchical society, because if you have sufficient assets to purchase what they call sufficient sovereignty, if you can buy sovereignty because you're wealthy, then your degree of sovereignty will be greater than somebody who can't afford to buy so much sovereignty.
But it will also be subject to the whims of the people who were opaquely running the monetary system in whatever technate you happen to be living in. Isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you may be rich today. You're going to be poor tomorrow if they just start deleting your money willy-nilly because you said something wrong on social media.
Yeah, and it is the perfect system for picking winners and losers in all not just for people that might say the wrong thing. I mean, it is. I mean, to extrapolate this further, if you think about it, if they manage to create this system, and they're certainly putting in the infrastructure that would enable that to happen, potentially there would be no need for law. There would be no need for government. There would be no need for policy. Government policy would be superfluous.
Oh, there's laws that are being enforced. They're just not laws that you consented to or certainly wrote.
Yeah, I mean, they would get that, but because everything would be controlled by AI algorithm. So you can program the algorithm to control what people do, what they say, where they go, even to the extent of that will start shaping what they think. And especially if you can make them into cyborgs and put genetically enhance them or put cyborg implants into their heads.
All of this rests on the deception is part and parcel of the sales game here. I want to read something from page 274. It's chapter 15 of your book that landed with me, and that's the role of deception and what you're talking about, the establishment of these technates. You write, while the neo-nerds are constructing their gov-type technates, the public must be kept in the dark. Government has to look like it's functioning as usual to head off a public uprising against the totalitarian transformation to neo-feudalism that is taking place under everyone's noses.
Yeah.
That's a great way of putting what's going on. So that's to say to people, I talk to people that are skeptical about all this stuff, and I'm like, well, you got to read Iain Davis's book. You're outlining something that's going on, and it's going on in real time. And your book provides example after example after example of how what's going on, it's taking place in real time. It may be in embryonic form now, and it may be pitched as, for your benefit or for your convenience, but it's most certainly what you're talking about is in the title, The Digital Dictatorship.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at laws that are being passed at the moment, for example, in the UK we've got the Online Safety Act, they've got the Digital Services Act in the EU. You're now talking about in the US, they're talking about bringing in the Kids Online Safety Act and all this kind of stuff. That is all about digital control. That is all about digital control of what we say and who we can communicate with in the digital space. Now, they want to create a society which is that the parallel facsimile of which exists only in a digital space. There is no other space. So in terms of you think of the kind of social interaction that we have at the moment, which things like lockdowns stop us being able to do. So they're talking about having a society, a digital tokenized society, which is totally controlled by, even they call them city brains. One of the things that they're talking about is, and certainly they've done this in places like Shenzhen in China, where you've got companies that oversee a city brain that links together all social functions of the city and monitors it from a central kind of monitoring perspective, that pretty much controls everything that everyone does within that city. Now, if we have this patchwork of realms that is being constructed through things like special economic zones, and that starts to take root within nation states, one of the concepts that they're very keen on promoting, and certainly one of the things that's within the network state, is the idea that the people that are behind it, the private investors, crowdfund and crowdsource the development of their own city states, their own free city states. Well, if your crowdfunders are Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Larry Ellison, if they're crowdfunding your city state within a nation state, pretty soon your city state is going to have far more resources than the nation state. So it's like a kind of parasite that is sucking resources out of the nation state, weakening the nation state. And you know what these things work like when they first start rolling this stuff out, and they are rolling it out around the world. First, it's being sold to the business community as being innovation hubs where they're not subject to the regulations and any of the regulations that they're subject to under national government. So it's enticing the business community to get on board. But then when they get to the point of enticing us to get on board, one of the ruses they're using is selling it as libertarianism, which it most certainly is not. But the other one is that, this is your opportunity to break away from the yoke of oppressive government overreach. So you kind of think, oh, well, great, I can, and I am certain that when they get to the point of enticing us to go and live there, live in one of these city states, that's the way we will be. It will be sold to us with, it's just perfect convenience. We don't have to, we get everything we want if we go there. But unfortunately, the agreement that you have to make to live in one of these city states that they're building is that you will give away all your sovereignty. You'll just hand it over to them, lock, stock, and barrel.
Right. So isn't it true that one of the motivations of people in power now, which is, let's just call it the joint venture between old line money and the tech bros, don't they have a huge motivation now to make things under the current system as miserable as possible?
Yeah, there's already, there's that you can go back sort of 10, 15 years. There have been papers written about the AI controlled government, the so-called agentic state, where governance is controlled by algorithm.
Yeah.
Some people call it algocracy or whatever. And that is very firmly in their mind. That is exactly. I mean, Mark Andreessen said that AI is their philosopher's stone.
You've used his name a couple times. Refresh people on who Mark Andreessen is.
Mark Andreessen is the head of Andreessen Horowitz, which is arguably the biggest tech investment venture capitalist firm in the world.
Right, and he's knee deep in the Trump administration too.
Oh yeah, he's been appointed, or he has been instrumental in appointing people to the Trump administration, and nobody elected Mark Andreessen.
Yeah, I always see his rather distinct head when I hear the name Mark Andreessen. I know who he is.
Yeah,
but I've heard his name a bunch of times. Let me ask you this: let's talk about a timeline. We're about to go into 2026. We're a few days away from that. When do you think, what are we looking at in terms of a year when the trap would be finally sprung if we don't do anything right now?
I mean, I think I'm not entirely clear why, but I think 2030 is a pivotal point. They've obviously, my view is that if you look at the rollout of the infrastructure globally, which is already largely in place. So interoperability using a unified ledger of some sort is already possible. There have already, there've been plenty of experiments already done to make this system work around the world. Not just the BIS. The BIS have been formative, but the EU, the British government, the Bank of England. There's been plenty of experiments to make sure this will work. Now, that means that what they really need, one of the problems that they've got is data centers. They need, if this is going to happen the way that they envisage, there'll be a massive increase in energy demand just to service the data centers.
Which advances the agenda of making life miserable by driving up energy costs for the man on the street.
Yeah, and which is why Trump announced that the government's kind of acquiescence to the Stargate project, although the Stargate is privately financed, but again, it's creating the regulatory framework to enable it to happen. If 2030, I think pretty sure that the whole system will be set up. I mean, we're already seeing the push for digital identity in the UK, the EU are as close as they can possibly be to actually rolling out central bank digital currency linked to a digital identity. They've already done that. So this is going ahead. This is the point that I stress a lot in the book.
Right.
This is you can, and that's why I give so many examples. This isn't theoretical. Part of it is theoretical because part of it is about this wacky philosophy they've got. But the other part, the practical application of what they're doing is not theoretical, because there are so many examples of this system being built.
Right.
And 2030 looks like they want to have all their ducks lined up. They want it all in place, ready to go 2030.
I got to tell you, Iain, your book is such an eye-opener. And it's really, on a personal note, it helped me sort of get off the fence in my own work on War for Bankocracy, which, I'm going to get back to that. But your book, reading that, was like, okay, now it clarified a lot and it helped me a lot. And it also is something else I want to mention about your book. I think there are a lot of people out there, I know a lot of people personally, who think, oh, well, you guys, you're so paranoid about this, you believe in these conspiracies and whatnot. And yet these same people who might be skeptical toward the alternative media and toward people like you and me, they know something's wrong and they're at least willing to admit that the system is rigged. And I think your book, I've sent your book to a couple of people they have that sort of skepticism, but they're not really willing to make the leap yet to where you and I have been for quite some time. Your book, because it is so well footnoted and researched and so well written, is a great way to kind of nudge people over the line and get them onto our side of this fight. And it is an existential fight, to be clear. So I want to congratulate you on writing the book. How long is the line of people who are looking to get movie rights into dark technocracy?
It's a very short line, non-existent line as well. I mean, I mean, I'm really glad. Thank you very much. It's very kind of you to say that, because I mean, you know, your work as well is one of the things that has kind of that has informed me over the years. So it's nice to be able to return the favor a little bit. I mean, that is the point. The point is something that I've always stressed in my work, and I know exactly what you mean about, you know, being considered fringe or whatever, is that I have tried consistently since I've been doing this, and I've been doing this about 10 bit more years, 15 years or something, is to say that, look, what I'm referencing here is in the public domain.
Right.
This is public domain information.
I'm using their documents. That's what I do on my channel.
These are
your
their
words. You said this.
Yeah, this is what they said. This is what they've done. There are massive global think tanks that have produced books about this idea.
Yeah.
And yet, if you try and point a mainstream media journalist in that direction and ask them just to consider this information, it's like, you know, well, as you well know, it's an almost impossible task.
Right.
Probably because their editors know that they can't publish that kind of thing.
Right.
I mean, in the UK, we've got.
I'm talking about person-to-person appeal of friends and family. I'm seeing a lot. The resistance, like you're just described, insofar as journalists are concerned, that resistance as far as people is concerned, acquaintances, friends, family, it's coming down. It's coming down fast. People know something's wrong, and I think your book is a great way to kind of push them in the right direction.
Yeah, I really hope so, because that's the kind of the main focus of what I'm doing. I just want people to consider this information, because the problem is they're not going to get it while they're sitting there watching CNN. CNN is not going to tell them.
Yeah.
The BBC is not going to tell them.
Let me ask you this as we kind of wind down here. What is the best place for people to find your work?
Yeah, well, it's iaindavis.com, and you're quite right. My name's spelled with two I's, IAINdavis.com, all one word. My Substack, which is iaindavis.substack.com. To get the book, it's all one word, the Technocratic Dark State.com. And that will take you to the publishers page, and the publishers are Papercut Publishing, run by Mark Goodwin and Whitney Webb. And I write individual pieces for Unlimited Hangout, Whitney Webb's site. I also have, my work is spread about quite a bit. I'm quite fortunate that a lot of other outlets kind of distribute my work. So the Off Guardian in particular, Technocracy News and Trends, these are other outlets as well. So you pretty much, if you put in Iain Davis, you'll probably find a site that's got something that I've written.
Very good. On behalf of Solari Report, I want to thank you for being here. On behalf of my own channel, Best Evidence, thank you for doing this, and thank you for the enormous undertaking that writing that book had to have been. But the book is absolutely dynamite, and I urge people to go out and get yourself multiple copies. Give them out for Christmas. Now's the time. This interview will post on Solari, like I said, on December 18th. It'll be after Christmas, after the New Year, when it shows up on my channel's Best Evidence. But Iain Davis, this book is such an eye-opener. I thank you for your work, and I thank you for your time here today. And happy, Merry Christmas to you, sir.
And to you, John. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Great. All right. Well, that is it for the Solari Report. Thanks for watching, and we will see you again in the new year.